So today we're working on things called two-step equations. It's called two-step equations, right? Oh, here's the two steps. Because in our question, if we split at the equal sign, there will be two numbers on the side of the letter. One here, one here. It may take more than two steps to get to the final answer, but there's basically usually two numbers, right? One's a coefficient, the other one's a constant, okay? So now, it becomes a little bit more difficult. We did questions like this last year, right? It's more difficult because now we have choices to make. Which one do we remove first? The 2 or the 4? There was a recommendation made in grade 8. Do you guys remember what the recommendation was in grade 8? Or which one do you try to solve first? No?
I don't remember what you said 2 minutes ago.
Okay. No? Nobody remembers? Gracie?
Is it the one closest to the
In this case, it is, but that's not always the case, right? But that's good logic, right? Because the numbers can be turned around. So it's the number not attached to the letter, right? So it's the constant we want to try to get rid of first. In this case, that is the 4, right? So the process is still the same as what we did in day 1. To get rid of a number, we do the opposite, right? So we look at this and we go, okay, what's that 4 doing to the letter, the variable? We do the opposite calculation, right? So what is it? What's the operation between the 4 and the W? Subtract. What's the opposite of subtracting? Adding. So we add 4 to both sides, right? Remember 4? Add 4 here, add 4 here, right? And we go cross off the 4s, because minus 4 plus 4 makes 0. And we're left with a 2W. And what do we have on the other side? 12. 8 and the 4 need to combine together. Okay? So, don't work left to right. Work vertically. Keep the left side on the left side, the right side on the right side. That way you don't confuse the two sides. We still cover this side up. We're not done yet because the W is not all by itself yet. So we still need to get rid of that 2. How do we get rid of that 2 now?
Divide by 2?
Yeah, because it's multiplying, so the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we go divide by 2. So we go here, we go divide by 2, and divide by 2. Those cancel out, and we get W is equal to 12 over 2, which just simplifies down to 6. Okay. So in grade 8, what we said is going to go over here. Typically, when solving two-step equations, the first thing we want to do is add or subtract. So then the second step is going to be to multiply or divide. Okay? Keyword typically. Right? So in grade 8, they sort of made it seem like on purpose this is the way you always do it. It doesn't have to be. Okay? So this is what makes grade 9, I think, fun and also more challenging.
Well,
Is
it's not a word actually now. Yes, it is.
Yes, it
because
is.
they added it. Friction.
And-
Dictionary.
and it's become more challenging because you have choices to do, right? So what's going to happen now is we can do multiplying and dividing first, and then do adding and subtracting second.
And now they also added persons to the dictionary.
So what makes it more difficult is you're going to ask me, Mr. Dhaliwal, am I doing this right? And technically, you're allowed to do any step you want to do, as long as you're doing it correctly. It may not be the most efficient method for that particular problem, right? But you're allowed to do it, right? If we want to add or subtract, here is a more complete rule. Adding and subtracting, what we do it is once per side, just like we just did. Once per side. So add a plus 4 here, and a plus 4 here. We increase this side by 4. We're going to increase this side by 4. Okay? However, multiplying and dividing is slightly different. If you want to multiply or divide, here's the rule. Every single term needs to be multiplied or divided. If you cut this side down by a half, you need to cut this side down by half. Everything that's on that side. Okay, so we're going to do that here. So we're going to, instead of doing adding, subtracting first, we're going to look at this question and we'll go, okay, let's do the multiplying and dividing first. Right? So we cover this up. We want to get rid of that 2. That 2 is timesing W. So the opposite of timesing is dividing. So the rules still work the same way. But when we divide, everything gets divided. This gets divided. This term gets divided. And this term. Okay? So now we do our cleanup. So when we clean up the very first term, the 2W over 2, what do we get? W. Because the 2 on the top cancels the 2 on the bottom, we get a W. When we clean up the middle term, what do we get? 2. All right, so
4.
good. Now, some people are a little sloppy with their notations, and every single time they put a number underneath here, they always put that slash underneath there, even if you're adding and subtracting, and I've talked to you about it. This is why it starts getting confusing. You got to use the right notations for what operation is. This is for division, okay? Not for adding and subtracting. So when we're doing adding and subtracting up here, no lines. Yes, William?
So for the multiplying and dividing, when you divide the one number, you divide every other number?
Yeah. All right, so now the reason why we taught this way in grade 8, all right, because in grade 8, 2 reasons. Everything is nice whole numbers. So it was always easier to add and subtract first. And when you divide, if you do the adding and subtracting first, there's only one thing on this side and one thing on that side. So automatically you are already dividing everything. We just didn't talk in that language, right? So one less thing for you to know in grade 8 because here's the first time learning how to solve, right? So now, this is going to become very beneficial in grade 9. We're not going to do it in today's lesson. Most of the questions we're going to do is going to be using what's the method we did in grade 8. However, if we realize we can pick whatever order we want to go in, we can avoid using fractions. And that's where we make mistakes, right? What are the rules for adding and subtracting fractions? What are the rules for multiplying and dividing fractions? So by doing this, which will be day 3, day 4 stuff, we can make those questions a lot easier to handle. Right? So we got this done here. We're not done yet because the W is not by itself, so we need to get rid of that 2. How do we get rid of that 2?
Divide by 2.
No. Add 2. It's the operation between the W and the 2 is a minus, so we got to go plus 2 on this side and a plus 2 on that side, and we get a W left over here, and you get a 6 left over there, and we get the exact same answer. So that's important, right? We came up with the same answer as before. Same equation, 2 different paths. Right? So in this question, it didn't really make a difference of which way you went. Sometimes it's just easier to go one way versus the other. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. All right? Okay. So I just wanted to introduce this because it's going to show up again after spring break. So for most of the stuff we're going to do today, we're just going to do it this way. But if you want to experiment, you could do it the other way, right? Okay, let's go over here. Let's just do a couple questions with you guys. We're not going to do all of these, all right? So, last time, same rules apply. If the question has decimals in it, the final answer, don't leave it as a fraction. Actually, use your calculator to figure out the numbers, all right? So, let's do this one here. We're going to split at the equal sign here. Cover up the side that doesn't have the letter. There's 2 numbers sitting there. Which one do we get rid of first? The 1.5. We do the opposite calculation. Is that adding, subtracting, or multiplying? Subtract. It's positive 1.5. So we go minus 1.5 here. And minus 1.5 here. So those cancel out. You're left with x over 2.5. On the other side, oh, my pen is acting up. 2.5 and 0.8. So I grab a calculator and I do that calculation. Right? Where is it? I clear it. 0.8 minus 1.5, and we get negative 0.7. Negative 0.7. Right? We're not done until the x is 100% by itself, so you still have that 2.5 on the other side. You got to do the opposite calculation. How do we get rid of the 2.5 this time? Multiply. It's dividing. So remember when we multiply, to write it in the numerator. Don't go times 2.5 on the bottom. A number on the top cancels a number on the bottom. So do it there. And times 2.5 here. So the 2.5s cancel out. We're left with the x. On the other side, we just do that calculation. So grab my calculator again. And then multiply those two numbers. I have negative 0.7 times 2.5. And I get negative 1.75. Okay? Not too bad. All right? However, these can be tricky. Let's jump over to this question here. Okay? We're going to split at the equal sign. All right? We cover up the side that doesn't have the number, a letter. Which number are we getting rid of? The 3 or the 7 first?
3.
The 3. All right? The constant. The one not attached to the x. Okay. How do we get rid of the 3? Do we add 3 or subtract 3? Subtract. I heard different things. I heard subtract and I heard add. Okay. I did this one on purpose because many people make mistakes with this one. This plus sign belongs to the number behind it. This minus sign belongs to the 3. So if I did subtract 3 like this, you get negative 6. They didn't cancel each other out. You need to go plus 3 for them to cancel out, right? So this minus sign belongs to the 3. So those cancel each other out, and we need to do the same thing to the other side. All right? So we go cross, cross, and then you have the 7x left over. My pen is acting up. And 2 plus 3, we get 5. Okay. So we're not done yet because the x is not by itself. How do you get rid of that 7? Divide it, right? And since this is whole numbers here, we, not divide by 5, divide by 7. We cancel out the 7s, we left with the x, and we have 5 over 7. Okay.
So we don't make it into a decimal unless it has a decimal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So unless there's decimals in it, and most word problems. Most word problems have like money in it or like a science measurement, right? Okay, we'll do one more, and the rest of the class will be working.
What if you do make it in decimal? Do you still get marks for it or no?
You'll get marks, but you get mark taken off. So what happens is a decimal is not as accurate as a fraction, and they convey a different level of precision, which you'll learn about in grade 11 science class. What does the precision of a number mean? Right? Okay, final question. Split at the equal sign. Now the numbers are on the letters are on the other side. It doesn't really matter. We cover up the side that doesn't have the letter. We have a 5 and we have a 4. Which one do we get rid of first? 5. Is it plus 5 or minus 5? Minus, because that's a positive 5 here. The opposite of a positive 5 is a negative 5. If you do negative 5 over here, negative 5 over here. Once per side. That's a rule for adding and subtracting. Right? So I'm going to ask you the question. So what do we write on the left-hand side now?
Negative 4x.
Not 4x.
Negative 7.
Negative 3. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Okay, what do we write on the other side?
Negative 4x.
Good. So many of you guys heard it. But this is another common error. This subtraction belongs to the 4. So when you cancel out those 5s, that is still there in the next step because it belongs to the 4. So it went from a subtraction sign to a negative sign, right? Okay, so next up, cover up the 3. How do we get rid of that 4? Divide by positive 4 or negative 4? Negative. Because you want the negative signs to go away as well. You want, let's go gray. Right? Right? Because you want x left over. If you divided by just positive 4, you'd have left with negative x. Right? So you go negative 4 on this side, and the 4's go away, and you have left with the x, and what do we have on the other side? 3 over 4, because the negative signs cancel each other out. And that's it.